the Taliban were so taken aback by the collapse of the government that they actually offered the United States to maintain its security grip on Kabul long enough to actually evacuate all of its people. And Biden was like, no, I want to evacuate faster than that. We'll just take the airport. You guys take Kabul, which is insane. I mean, it's completely wild. I've never seen anything remotely like this botchery. And I don't think anybody has, because it really is a combination of the fall of Saigon, the 1979 hostage crisis. Instead of 52 Americans being held hostage by the Iranian mullahs, now you have presumably hundreds or thousands of Americans and American green card holders and Afghans who worked with us who are stuck behind enemy lines right now. After that bombing last week, it looks like the 1982 Hezbollah bombing of the Marine barracks in Lebanon. And I think you're going to have to add in the element of Iran-Contra here, where I think that there's a very, very solid shot the United States is going to be sending money directly to the Taliban in order to facilitate them sending whoever we want out. Right. So it's a complete disaster area. It's a mess. And there's sort of a couple of aspects of it that are worthy of discussion. One is the actual tactical mess that was made here, namely withdrawing all close air support, withdrawing all military contractors from the Afghan military, so completely collapsing them from within, and then saying, you know what, we don't even need Bagram Air Base. We'll hang out here at the embassy and here at HKIA at Hamid Karzai International Airport, and you guys take the rest and we'll rely on you for security. I mean, tactically, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. But then there's the actual strategic thinking, which is, was it really necessary for us to pull out this way? Like, at all? We had 2,500 troops on the ground in Afghanistan. We had not had a combat casualty in Afghanistan since February of 2020. And so for all the talk about this is America's longest war, it's an endless war, it was more dangerous to be a cop in Chicago over the course of the last 18 months than it was to be an American soldier in Afghanistan, statistically speaking. And so the notion that we were on the verge of a blow up, that we were going to have to insert tens of thousands of troops, I've seen no evidence provided for that contention whatsoever. Biden just wanted to pull out and he didn't care what happened.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And the idea that we're going to start funding the Taliban, I mean, look, not that we haven't been funding the Taliban already, but what we did was we gave them an army and all the weapons they would ever need to conduct warfare. I mean, this is the same shit we've done in Pakistan over the last, 60 years or so, something like that. We've funded the ISI, which if you ask anybody in the special operations community or the intelligence community, they know that about 60% of the ISI are fucking terrorists, right? Like, they are the worst human beings on earth. And they are solely responsible for the Mumbai terror attacks. We have direct evidence that it was being controlled from Pakistan, right? And we're going to do it again now. Like, it's just a matter of time. Right now, we've started the clock, right? The stopwatch has begun on when the next terror attack is going to happen. And it may not be here in the United States. Maybe it's somewhere else. But either way, it falls on us.
Right.
I mean, have you ever heard of anything in the history of America, even when we've had some leaders or whatever that are disliked on the international community? I've never heard the English Parliament go into session and say, we're not going to work with the Americans again until this motherfucker's gone. Like, I've never even heard of anything like that before. Because you don't say shit like that.
It's crazy. I mean, the international community's reaction to Biden, and it really does give the lie to the whole, Trump was so bad and Biden's going to restore America on the world stage. And now most of the world is looking at Biden, and you're either an American enemy, in which case you're licking your chops, or you're an American ally, in which case you're saying, I need to triangulate fast, because these people cannot be trusted to keep any of their commitments whatsoever. If you're Taiwan at this point, why would you look to the United States for any solid level of support? If you're Saudi Arabia and the Biden regime, Biden administration is now negotiating with the Iranian regime, and you're the Saudis, you're like, I better triangulate fast and start making some connections with Russia, with China, try and solidify those connections with Israel and Egypt, because I can't rely on the Americans. I saw a story last week about how Israel had not been sharing intelligence with the Biden administration. All I could think is, why in the world would they? Like, what would prompt them to do so, given the fact?
I mean, you don't want to give Biden information and have him put it on a list and hand it over to the fucking Taliban, right? That's probably not a good idea. Jesus Christ, man. These people are fighting for their lives. Look, I am not. That situation with Israel and Palestine is very complex. It's a very nuanced situation. But the idea that they're under constant attack is not. That we didn't just make that shit up.
Right.
That shit is real. It's been going on for a long time. Saudi Arabia, frankly, they can go fuck themselves. You know what I mean? I mean, 83% of the primary schools there are your madrasas, which teach death to America. So I don't give a fuck about those people. I mean, honestly, clean up your own shit. But it is, you're absolutely right. Why would anybody partner with us at this point?
Yeah, and look, the United States routinely partners with people who we find pretty egregious. The question is a balance of power interest. And when it comes to the Saudis versus the Iranians, I mean, there's not really a good pick there, right? The Saudis are a disaster area, have been a disaster area for a long time. But the Iranians are the chief sponsors of global terrorism and regional terrorism. And so the conflict in the Middle East, to get out of Afghanistan, is really a serious concern for the United States insofar as Iran has killed American troops in Iraq, has created the instability in Syria, has created instability in Lebanon, is creating instability in Yemen, is supporting global terrorism all over the place. And now they're on the verge of gaining nuclear weapons, and Biden is negotiating with them. Meanwhile, they're launching drone attacks on Saudi oil sites. So, I mean, all of this stuff does have ramifications for sort of the United States' place in the world. But the bottom line here is that if you really are worried about sort of America's geostrategic interests, put aside the Middle East for a second and look at China. Right? China is immediately signifying that they're going to recognize the Taliban. They're going to get access to all of their rare earths minerals. They're not only that, we handed the Taliban like $85 billion of American sophisticated military equipment, ranging from night vision goggles, which completely changes the war on the ground and the conditions on the ground there, because that was our superpower, as we could see at night and they couldn't, to like fixed wing aircraft. We handed them drones. We handed them 100 helicopters. We handed them something like 360,000 machine gun AKs, so-called assault rifles.
Yeah.
These are. I mean, this is an enormous amount of weaponry, and the more sophisticated stuff ain't going to be flown by the 8th century goat herders who are constituting the Taliban. That stuff's just going to get sold right over to the Chinese, who are immediately going to reverse engineer all of our military tech. Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah, I mean, we could spend all day talking about these military situations and our geopolitical stances and stuff like that. This all reminds me, I mean, just the culmination of all of this stuff, the lies from the government, the ridiculous way that they've prosecuted this situation, but pretty much everything since they've taken over. And this isn't new, right? I mean, we've been facing this stuff for some time now, just continuously going downhill. America is kind of rotting from the inside. And I wonder, it reminds me of that Phil Jackson quote from his book, "You're only successful at the moment you perform a successful act," right? We think, well, this is America. It's the best country in the world. But you better goddamn be ready to stand up and make that the case every single day, or shut the fuck up, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to hear that shit anymore until somebody's willing to do something about it. Now we have men willing to do something. Our government is inept. So certain people went overseas and handled that business themselves. There's about 10 to 15,000 people alive today that wouldn't have been alive, right? Mm-hmm. If not for these men and these backdoor channels that we've been using. And that is fucking pathetic. Honestly, it is pathetic that we've left our people there. Like one of my buddies just got out this morning. He's in Qatar today, right? But he was a U.S. interpreter that actually lives here in Austin. Right?
You don't say.
He's lived here for a while. He went back. So the U.S. government says, hey, we're going to pull everybody out by X date. So all these Afghan people who are now American citizens are like, all right, I'm going to go back and visit my family probably for the last time, because the Taliban's going to murder fucking everybody as soon as they get a chance to. So I'm going to go back, visit my family, get out before this shit goes down. And then Biden pulls the fucking bathtub drain for no reason.
No reason. And Ben, my biggest question to you is, why give the world a date? I don't understand that. It's like driving with your wife to a surprise party and being like, guess where we're going? Surprise party. I don't understand that whatsoever. And to me, that was the biggest failure of all of this. What was the reasoning, do you think, on his side? Because I have not found a good answer for this so far.
Originally, you remember the claim was that this was because the Trump administration had given a date of May 1st for us to get out. But that deal was totally conditional. Right? If you actually look at the deal that was put on paper by Pompeo and the Trump administration, it said if the Taliban do X, Y, and Z, then we'll start to pull out and complete it by X date. The Taliban didn't do any of X, Y, or Z, so it was really unrealistic that we were ever going to pull out by May if, for example, Trump had been reelected. So then Biden said, I want out by September 11th, because for some odd reason, he thought the symbolic date of pulling out by September 11th would be sort of a bookend. And he's going to get the bookend, right? He's going to get American bodies falling from towers on September 11, 2001, and Afghan bodies falling from C-17s, circa the end of August 2021. So he's getting the bookend, but that's what it started off as. And then he accelerated the date to August 31st because he was told by his military people, we're not even sure we can hold this thing until September 11th, given the constraints that you've now put on us. And so it got accelerated to August 31st. He announced the August 31st date. The Taliban seized on that. And they said, okay, well, if that's your date, that's now our red line. You guys have to be out by August 31st, or we're going to start basically just getting out of the way and letting ISIS do whatever the hell it wants, letting Al-Qaeda do whatever the hell it wants. And hey, we might turn our guns on you. You never know. And so Biden had to accelerate that timeline. There are a bunch of massive and obvious strategic blunders here, ranging from, again, the withdrawal of all close air support and military contractors. So we grounded their entire air force and destroyed their capacity to make war. The Afghan military took 50,000 dead since 2015. And Joe Biden's out there being like, yeah, these guys are all cowards. They just melted out. And it's like the United States between 2015 and now took a little bit under 100 American dead, which is, every one of those is horrifying and tragic. But the Afghan military took 50,000 dead between 2015 and now. And Joe Biden's like, yeah, they're all cowards. It wasn't him removing all close air support, which is exactly how their entire military was built. It was just, they were cowards and they just went away. That was part of the problem. He also decided to set the date because he wanted the symbolism. He set the date in the middle of the summer fighting season, which is like the most obvious thing. Right? Everybody was advising him, dude, like wait a couple of months and now it's winter in Afghanistan and the fighting season is over and the Taliban, run back up into their caves and they stay there for a few months. And that at least gives the Afghan army some time to adjust before the Taliban come rushing down from the hills again. And instead, Biden's like, nope, we're going to do this in the middle of the summer in the heat of the fighting season. And we are going to basically just hand the country over to them. It's like the utter incompetence of it is amazing. And then he blames his own military for it, right? Then he blames, everybody gets the blame, right? It's Trump's fault. It's the Afghan military's fault. And it's his military leadership's fault. He went out there last week in his pathetic ass covering PR move. And he says, we had universality among my military commanders as to the mission and to the method of accomplishing the mission. That's not even true. I mean, we have,
No, of course not.
I mean, everybody was telling him, Austin was telling him, Milley was telling him, for as much as I don't like those guys, they were telling him February, March, you got to leave a skeleton crew there. And if you want to pull out, this is not the way you pull out. And he was like, nope, we're getting out. Milley said openly, the reason that they got rid of Bagram Air Base is because Biden had told them he wanted 600 to 700 troops on the ground. They could not hold both Bagram and the embassy with 600 to 700 troops. So Milley said, okay, we'll defend the embassy, but we can't defend Bagram. And then we'll use Kabul International Airport. And that is not because Milley didn't want to hold Bagram. It's because Biden told him, I'm giving you basically this number of troops. Now pick.